Well, hello, beautiful people. Today I want to talk to you about, my name is, let me get started in the right way. My name is Ben Piccini, and this is Radical Civility, so welcome to my little podcast. And I am very excited to talk to you a little bit today about, that is the right way to say it. I don't know if you should be excited to listen to what I'm about to say, but I'm very excited to tell you about what I'm going to say. A few of my friends were listening to my podcast. I very much appreciated. They were posting it on Facebook. And I noticed that there was a lot of commentary about like the Nickelodeon episodes and basically none about the civility episodes. And I was like, guys, come on, what's wrong? Like, you don't like the civility? And they were like, listen, man. Like, I know you really like talking about like grace and civility and like all of those things, but no one cares. And I laughed and I was like, you're probably right, but I care and I like it. So I'm still going to do it. I don't care. Whatever. These are actually my favorite ones to do. The Nickelodeon ones feel more fun, like a little bit more, a little more popular, but a little bit less nourishing. These are better for my soul over the long term. So I am going to talk about my civility commandment today. I'm actually almost done. This is the last one, and I haven't published one in a while because it's been COVID time. You can see that I'm growing my hair out, and it's getting curly and crazy because I'm going to wait to get a haircut. I was thinking about it the other day. I was like, I should just wait to get a haircut until after COVID is over. So we'll see how crazy it gets. Hopefully it won't be too long. So I am going to talk to you today about a specific aspect of grace. We've talked about grace in a few different ways. And today I want to talk about it as proportionality. And so why don't we dive in? And I'll talk to you in just a second. So a friend of mine mentioned a very interesting thought experiment. He said he was listening to it in a law class, and the question is, what's the morality if you have the ability to choose and you have the necessity to choose? You can give one person a blinding migraine for a week, or you can give 50 people a slight irritable headache for a week. Which is better and why? And in the moment, he felt like it was just such a dumb topic, just such a waste of time. And the more that he thought about it, the more it actually became relevant. It was this, sleeper missile that all of a sudden hits you when you're not expecting it as quarantines have been happening, and it really made him reflect and think. Let me give you another example that may introduce what I'm talking about today. On the back of a cereal box, I shouldn't call it a knockoff. There is a box of not Honey Nut Cheerios. I think they're called Golden Circles, or some. What are they called? Honeys? Anyway, it's the knockoff brand of Honey Nut Cheerios, and on the back it says it has some interesting figures about bees and honey, and one of them is it takes a bee their entire life to create 1/8 of a teaspoon of honey. That is fascinating to me. So today what I'm talking about is proportionality. And there are a lot of aspects to this. I'm going to try and cover two main ones. And I think that those two things together actually answer a lot of the problems that we're seeing. This is actually a much more germane topic for social media than I think people realize. So I'm going to start with something from Brian Kaplan, whom I adore. I think it's very weird. Like he dabbles in all sorts of odd stuff, but then every once in a while has these really cool thoughts about civility. And I'll link to it in the show notes, but basically he says quantify, what was it? Quantify your anger? I think that's what he called it. No, monetize your anger. That's even better. So this is like the most economist of all economist things in the world. So he blogs over at Econ Log. So here's the blog post. And it's not very long. All of his stuff is really, really short. And he talks about economic principles like willingness to pay and things like that. But his point here is really good and really simple. He basically says, listen, turn your anger or your rage over anything that is currently happening into a dollar amount. How much money would you have to find in your pocket in order for that rage to go away? And he essentially said, if anything costs no, I'd say less than $5. Just let it go. One of the things we're seeing is this inability right now to prioritize our anger. And putting a money amount to it forces you to do that, because all of a sudden you say, okay, so how much does it cost to me that somebody just cut me off? And once you think about it for a second, you go, it's not worth it, right? If I found $5 in my pocket, I'd be about right where that guy cut me off. I'd be like, it's an okay day. And if those two things balance out, then it's fine. So you make a mental rule for yourself and you say, is this worth being angry about? And what I have found with this is that 90% of the things that used to make me angry are just gone. They just evaporate. Because it's not actually the big things that are getting me angry or making me, outraged and just piling. Rather, it is the piling on. It is the one small thing and then another small thing and then another small thing. And then all of a sudden I'm saying crazy things like, and this stupid country is on the wrong track and I can't believe who's in office right now. And I'm just kind of letting everything piling on. But like psychologically, some of that's on me. So monetizing your anger. When I say proportionality, what I'm saying is for yourself, if something happens to you that you don't like, that you don't think it is a good thing, the first thing you say to yourself is, how much money would it take for me to find in my pocket or on the road in front of me for me to go, yeah, this is not a big deal. Like today was a fine day. Like, yeah, the guy cut me off, but I also found $20. Rock on. And I think part of it too is like over time, I'm trying to like turn down those amounts. If somebody cuts me off and, it may have been $50 before and then $20 and then 10 and now finally 5. Like that's a good thing. And over time, now I'm getting to the point where I'm like, he's probably having a hard day. And I thought those people were crazy. The people who were like really nice when somebody cuts them off, I thought they were all faking it. And now it's like, it's not so hard to do anymore. And in fact, it's really healthy, I think. So when I say proportionality, what I mean is, I'll give you an audio example. There's these really cool things called gates. And a gate in audio means that if I talk quietly like this, I'm actually talking close to the mic, so it's not that quiet, but if you talk quietly, then the gate doesn't go up and it just cuts off all of that noise. So you don't even get to hear anything that doesn't get above a certain volume. Well, that's a really good, I wish that we had emotional gates, that we said, this is not important enough for me to actually be affected by, but we have the opposite. We actually, even if we're having a really good day, if a bunch of small things keep happening, it's like that's our norm. That's the normalized level of our sound. And so all of a sudden we start to overreact to things when they're actually not that bad. And keeping them in perspective like that, putting a money amount helps us to actually prioritize. So the first step in prioritization, in keeping track of how big these things are, is I want you to start monetizing your rage. There's a second aspect though, and it's actually the opposite. Let me talk for a second about things that make you angry that are like $100 issues or $1,000 issues, because there are those issues out there. And let me be clear, if something horrible has happened to you, I'm not telling you, it's not a big deal. Not at all. I'm saying pick the things that are making you angry, decide how big of a deal it is, put a money amount to it. And if it's more than that, those are the things that you're going to have to work through. And you're going to have to do an honest job. You may need therapy. That's fine. I think it's really important that we handle those in healthy ways. But I think a lot of the times it's the small things that add up, and not the bigger things that we think that they are. So now I've dealt with the small things, I've dealt with the big things. Proportionality is actually, the place that it came from, I think it was Jonathan Haidt, I think. I like Jonathan Haidt, so I might be ascribing something to him that wasn't him. But I was listening to a podcast and they were talking about, I want you to imagine that, this idea of intense emotional pain on one person. But it could be spread out across 50, right? The idea of the headache that I talked about earlier. But now instead of one person in 50, let's make it one person in 1,000,000 people. To the point where if I put my pain button on and I turn it on for one person, they can't even feel it. But if everybody at the same time put it on that person, it would be so crippling that they could die. And when I first heard this, I thought, wow, where is he going? What a weird thought experiment. And then he said, this is likes on Facebook. This is retweets. It is something that is so small it is imperceptible at all. It makes almost no difference. And certainly if somebody has 5,000 likes and you add one more, you are not responsible for whatever happens. If it was an off-color joke or if it was a little bit mean to somebody, you're not responsible for the 5,000 likes. You're only responsible for the one. So the 3 rules of proportionality are: monetize your anger. If it's something that is, and just gate out all of the stuff that doesn't matter. If it is something that matters, then deal with it healthily as you can. And third, don't excuse yourself, even if it's less than $5. Grace is the topic for today. Showing other people grace. Now, that doesn't mean that you need to be obsessed with every little thing you do and every like that you have on Facebook. But right now we're in a position where people don't take any ownership of small things that they do, and small things added up thousands and thousands and thousands of times over again are what are causing a lot of the problems. Let me give you another example. Imagine if let me start with likes, because this is a really easy one to actually apply. I am not saying that you should never ever like anything without doing a thorough 45-minute analysis of whether it was a good meme to like. I like pretty slipshod all the time. But if it's a 5 seconds of regret kind of a thing, if I get it wrong, then I take 5 seconds to be really, really on purpose before I like something. And by the way, it's incredibly freeing. Because I'll read something and I'll say, hey, that was pretty funny. And then I'll think to myself, ooh, could that be racist? Is there something about this that I'm missing? And if I can't see it after about 10 to 15 seconds and I've looked honestly, then I go, all right, I looked for 10 seconds. I feel good about that. This is a like on Facebook. Right? If I'm going to post something that's worth 2 to 5 minutes, right? That's going to feel really bad if I screw it up. So I'm going to take a little bit more time. And I'm still probably not going to get it right. I'm aiming for a 95% most of the time. Okay. I'm asking people to think a little bit more before they like something, especially in the condition of something like somebody getting picked on Twitter. Let me give you a better example that I think is probably the most powerful and the one that nobody really wants to bring up. And that's intellectual honesty. We talk about straw men, right? And fighting against straw men. And I love what somebody's come up with recently. One of the best things that I've seen that's been really popularized probably by Scott Alexander over at Slate Star Codex. And he wasn't the one that came up with it. I think he's popularized it, though, is the idea of steel manning, which is essentially what you do is instead of taking the worst argument from your opponent, you take the very best form of their argument and you argue against that. It's a much more intellectually honest way to do it. It's seeped into a few corners of the web, but it's not really popular yet. But let me just start with, right now, if I attack a straw man, the most that I'm going to get hit with is, you're arguing with, that's a logical fallacy. I actually think that we should hold people slightly accountable. No, let me rephrase. We should hold them fully accountable for something that's very small. If my son belches at the dinner table, which he did tonight, I'll have you know, he's not going to get grounded for 2 weeks, but he's going to get the full weight of what he should get when he belches at the dinner table, which is a look and a, hey, that's gross, don't do that. Okay? I'm not cutting him slack. It's just that it's a pretty small thing in the scheme of things. Well, there are a lot of people out there, especially politicians and some people in, I don't want to call them the media because it's more the opinion media, but there are people out there who know they're not being intellectually honest. The talk radio people, the ideologues, the pundits, right? The punditocracy. The people who move the opinions, they know that they're not always being intellectually honest, and yet they keep doing it. That is where I say you're wrong. I don't have any problem with people who are arguing in good faith and really believe that their side has more truth than the other side. Everybody thinks that. That's fine. What I have a problem with is people saying, okay, yeah, that wasn't a totally good argument to make. That's kind of a straw man. But, I'm a talk radio guy. So speak first, think later. Proportionality is recognizing that if somebody else does something to you and it's small, you can just let it go. But if it's something that you've done, you need to get in the habit of holding yourself accountable even for the little things. Because if we all took responsibility for the little teeny tiny things like the posts that we share and the likes that we put that are wrong and the words that we say and I was speaking more out of anger than out of kindness and I wasn't really engaging in good faith or I was really trying to paint them as worse than they are, I think the dialogue would change very, very quickly. Because good faith, in my mind, I think of good faith as being in a place where I say something foolish and the other person goes, did you mean to say that? And I go, no, I'm really sorry. I didn't mean to say that. And they say, no problem. Don't worry about it. We all make mistakes. And that means that I'm extending grace to others, but I'm holding myself accountable because I didn't really mean to say that. So, grace is good stuff. I've talked about it from a few different perspectives, and I think this proportionality stuff is really important. I will try and include, by the way, monetize your anger in the show notes. I keep saying that like I have show notes. I don't have show notes. I have a Facebook post. But if I ever do have show notes, I will try and include it there. I think the world will be better off when we learn to be patient with others and a little bit more critical of ourselves and not have blind spots just because something isn't a big deal. So thank you for listening, and I hope you found it helpful. Radical Civility is written, produced, and poorly edited by Benjamin Piccini. The views in Radical Civility do not necessarily reflect the views of my employer, my faith, my family, or myself in the future when I'm older and wiser. Thank you, everybody. Bye.